Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. For the first about 17 years of my higher ed career, I thought I was just a really great ally to the LGBTQIA plus community, but I was holding something back even to myself. And it wasn't until June 2021 that I decided to come out as a bisexual woman. In the years that have followed, I have put a lot of thought into how I can be an even better ally to my fellow queer students, faculty, staff, administrators, community members. And I think it would be really important to have this conversation with Kevin Tyler, who is just a fantastic person and a great friend, to talk about how marketers can support a sense of belonging for our LGBTQIA students, faculty, staff, and how we can stay up to date with the latest in the evolving language, how we can really show up and be better. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast designed for higher education marketers. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt, and I am so excited to have this opportunity to share insights and inspiration. With Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, I'm designing a different kind of podcasting experience. With each episode, I'll be bringing in a guest for a deep dive into the challenges and joys we all face in higher education marketing. After each episode, you can join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag HigherEdCMO. I would love to see this become like a book club, but for a podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at JamieHuntIMC. That's JamieHuntIMC for more opportunities to connect. So I'm really excited to be here with Kevin Tyler, who's the Director of Marketing and Community Engagement at Simpson Scarborough. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. It's been too long. Like episode 42 or something is like 41 too many episodes.
Agreed.
But I'm thrilled to have you. And as a start, I always ask my guests, can you tell us a little bit about your higher ed journey?
It feels like so long ago. I started in higher ed in, think, 2012. I had worked in electoral politics for a very long time in Ohio, running campaigns and raising money, et cetera. And at some point, all of my candidates lost in 2010. And so I did a little dabbling in corporate communications and marketing roles and got a call or an email from a place called Allyship back in Columbus, Ohio, saying, we have this thing that I think you'd be great at. So I went over there, and at the time, they were working in several different verticals, all purpose-driven brands, from health centers or health providers, financial centers who had a purpose-driven mission, higher ed, and some other verticals. And what I found most interesting, at least to me, is that I immediately clicked with the higher ed piece. I didn't really know much about higher ed other than that I went to school at University of Pittsburgh. I knew what my own experience was, but I had never really thought about looking into the nuts and bolts, the operations, the marketing of what I think is a very important public good. And so when I started at Ology, it was soon after that there was a decision from leadership to focus solely in higher education. And that's when I really took off, and I found my lane in higher ed. It was a very strange love story. It was an unexpected love story between me and higher ed, and I am so glad that the two of us met because it's an industry that I really feel strongly about. I'm emotionally attached to the industry of higher ed, and I feel so lucky to work in an industry like this one.
When I was in college, I had no idea you could work at a college unless you were a professor. Like, I had no idea.
Same. It felt like I felt so removed from that being a reality that it was just like they could have been robots teaching us, right? I never
Right,
thought of
right.
myself as being involved in an industry like higher education at the level and at the depth that I am now. And I am so surprised by it every day because I learn something new about it every day. And it is such an important component to our society that I'm really, really proud to work in it.
Me too. I can't imagine working in a different line of work. Like, it's unfathomable. Every once in a while, my mom is like, "Hey, you could transition to a different industry." And I'm like, "But I love it."
Right,
Yeah.
right. Right. I've had the opportunity to work in different levels of education, and I guess I should expand that because I think the K-12 space is just as critical as the higher ed space. Of course, they feed into each other, but I've learned so much about the different kinds of education, the models that exist, the alternatives, the policy, and how people talk about it. That it's really become part of me, and I really like education in its whole is something that I really feel strongly about.
What do you do at Simpson Scarborough?
So I contribute to marketing of the agency. We are a higher education marketing and branding agency, and we offer research, video, creative strategy, media, etc. And I help tell the story of the agency, the case studies, the work, and what our benefit is to higher education institutions. Also, I am contributing to the development of what's called the CMO Lab. And this is an effort, an initiative of the agency to fill a need that doesn't exist just yet. There is affinity groups for presidents and admissions people and everything in between, but there isn't really one of those for marketers. And so we're trying to fill that gap with this network of professionals, of peers, of experts to provide professional development, data and insights, and community and connection for the group of senior most marketing officers on campuses so that we can talk about the problems that we're dealing with collectively. I mean, there are some consistencies that exist in the lives of the daily lives of CMOs. And so, what are we doing? How can we work together to try to overcome some of the obstacles that are not just in front of our institutions individually, but for the industry as a whole? And I think the more that we can partner on some of those conversations and, of course, on those solutions, the better off we will be as an industry. And so we're trying to build that program in order to help individual institutions and their CMOs, but also the industry at large.
I love it. I love it. I love the CMO lab. I love the whole thing. Even though you stole one of my staff people to work on the CMO lab, I forgive you. It's okay.
Listen, I had nothing to do with that. I had nothing to do with that.
I texted, Jason, who I think he's the CEO of,
Correct.
Simpson Scarborough, right? Yeah, I texted him and I was like, "You stole one of my staff." For our listeners, if you've listened to me before, you probably know I identify as a queer woman. And Kevin, I think you identify as a gay man. And so I think that gives us a unique perspective on this topic. But I would love to hear what your journey has been as a gay man in higher ed.
It's funny. I think it's a really great question. I've never been asked this question before. And I show up into rooms my authentic self all of the time. I am very unapologetic in that. It took me a lot of time and a lot of work to get to that point. But I'm very, very proud of who I am. I'm very comfortable with who I am. And I know that that is not the case for a lot of people. And so I try to take up the spaces that mean something to me and that I have a say in. And not that I'm trying to represent the community, but I want to be a voice for it when a voice is needed. And so my path throughout higher education has been one, and really through every job, where I want to keep a close eye on equity and equality and kindness and respect. And no matter what kind of business, no matter what kind of trajectory or vision you have for the business, equity and equality, diversity, inclusion, belonging, all of these words that we hear so often on college campuses now mean so much. And it's not one of those things that you can just talk about, you have to be about. And I am often so honored and very pleased and not shy at all about reminding people who need to be reminded about, like, we are here for all. We should be here for all. I never want to have an active role in inviting people to places where they might feel harmed because of who they are.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important for marketers to be the voice of progress, because we are the people who have to know and be fluent in so many different cultures and activities and groups of people and communities about all the things that are happening on a campus. And I think that my trajectory into higher ed, being an openly gay, and I always add openly Black man, is that I have a perspective. And it's a perspective that isn't always represented in a lot of rooms. There are not a lot of people who do what I do who look like me and love like me. And I think it's very easy to talk about communities as if they are far off or far flung from the room that we are just making decisions in, when really they're all inside the room, or at least they should be all inside the room. And so I always want to make sure that the communities that I'm a part of are represented in decisions, because we deserve to be. And that's not a business decision. It's not a personal decision. It's just a human decision.
Yeah. Have you been out for your entire career?
Yeah, I came out when I was 16. I was on my way to school, and I told my mom, I looked at her dead in the face and said, "I don't think I'm straight." And I got out of the car and onto the bus. And by the time I got
Wow.
home from school, she had become a member of PFLAG, had gone down to
Oh,
Stonewall and had
oh.
done all the research. She took the day off, of course, but she had done all of this work to become more fluent in the ways that I would need her to be as I grew up. And she went on to become like the premier statewide speaker for PFLAG. PFLAG, for folks who don't know, is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And she became one of their like premier statewide speakers. She would travel all over the state of Ohio, giving these talks at high schools and parent teacher associations. And I was really very lucky to have a family who regarded pride in who we are as a as highly important. I know that that's not, again, it's not everyone's story in that regard, but I have been out for my entire professional career, and have been proudly so.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm so happy to hear that your family was like, "Yeah, we're all in on this."
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, coming from a Black family, half of whom is somewhat religious, I wasn't sure what the response would be, but I feel very, very lucky that it was what it was, and they're cool people.
I love that for you. I didn't come out until I was 42, and I was at Miami University, and I thought I was just a really good ally. Like, I was always advocating for our LGBTQ community, and then I'm like, "You know what? You've known for a really long time. You've known since you were, like, 14, and it's time to really embrace who you authentically are." And there's a lot of bi erasure in the world, and a lot of, like, people who say, "You don't count because you're in a straight passing relationship." But I see it as, like, I felt a lot of, I don't know if shame is quite the right word, but for my attraction to women, I felt like I was not normal. I'm putting that in air quotes.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I feel like being part of the community is important, and to represent that viewpoint in a cabinet setting, and making sure I'm going to the lavender graduations so that they see that somebody in their cabinet understands what their experience has been really, really important to me. But I genuinely was like, I'm just a rockin' ally. I just like, I'm all in on this. Apparently very selfishly. Hey all, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. I want to take a moment to thank my friends at MindPower who are making Season 2 of this Enrollify podcast possible. MindPower is a full-service marketing and branding firm celebrating nearly 30 years of needle-moving, thought-provoking, research-fueled creative and strategy. MindPower is woman-founded and owned, WBENC certified, nationally recognized, and serves the social sector, higher education, healthcare, nonprofits, and more. The MindPower team is made up of strategists, storytellers, and experienced creators. From market research to brand campaigns to recruitment to fundraising, the agency exists to empower clients, amplify brands, and help institutions find a strategic way forward. You can learn more about their work in the world by heading on over to MindPower Inc. That's mindpowerinc.com. And be sure to tell the crew that Jaime sent you their way.
I think we all come to it on a different timeline. I'm a firm believer that there is a day when the pain of hiding who you are is greater than the joy of honestly stepping into who you are authentically. And my day was March 16th when I was 16 years old, and others I know people friends of mine here in LA who came out when they're in their 50s, and there's
Wow.
no right time. There is no right way. It is all such a personal thing, which is why it's so important for industries like higher ed to accommodate and respect and understand where people are coming from and what they're bringing to your campus communities, because it's all so good.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to gloss over the cultures and the individualism and the identities and the desires of people when you're trying to create brand allegiance. Come be a bobcat, come be a whatever. People are coming into that as different people, and we need to talk to all
Yeah.
of them in a way that they can understand and they can see themselves in.
Absolutely. And we are all coming to it with identities that intersect, whether it's race, ethnicity, national origin, immigration status, ability. I mean, we're not a monolith.
We are not a
Yeah.
monolith. Every campus has a diversity all of its own, either visible or not visible, and people should be able to see themselves in any campus community who promises that they will fit and belong.
Yeah. So, from your perspective, how can universities really effectively demonstrate their commitment to inclusivity and support for LGBTQ students?
There's lots of ways. I think that this expands beyond just LGBTQIA plus individuals. I think like if you're going to say something, you have to do it and be it, right? And so if you're saying we're safe and welcoming, and you for all, and you belong here, and we welcome everyone, I would I would hope that you have some sort of fluency in what that means, right? If you have GLBTQIA students coming in to your campus, understanding what needs they might have and having those supports in place already, or at least working on them, is going to be an indication of your fluency and readiness for this community to be on your campus. I think that it's so easy to slap a rainbow sticker on something, or have some sort of like top level indication or communication that signifies that you understand what that thing means, that piece of culture. But it's quite a different thing to actually serve the community that you are inviting. And I think that things like asking what your pronouns are if you're learning remotely or in person. I mean, it's a fair question no matter how the education is being delivered. I think that's an indication, and then following through on referring to that person as they wish to be referred to. I think that it should not always be framed or couched in, we have mental health and suicide services for GLBTQ students. I mean, that is part of it, but it's not like our entire story isn't like trauma and pain all the time, right? Like, where are the celebrations of gay love and gay life and gay living, and where are the gay faculty members, and what are they doing, and how are they contributing to the community? Have they been given space to talk about the things that are important to the GLBTQIA community? I think that making sure that there is diversity in your leadership, and not from a numbers counting perspective, but
Mhm.
if you're qualified people who happen to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or otherwise, they should and they should be part of a leadership team. And seeing people who are in leadership who are part of your community is a very powerful thing. It's a very powerful thing to see a gay president. It's a very powerful thing. I have never
Mhm.
had a black male teacher in my entire life. And when I go to college campuses and see black male teachers, I am reminded of what an absence, what a gap it was in my experience. And I just think it's important to have representation at all levels of everything, because we are a talented group of people, and we we deserve to take up space and be able to make decisions, et cetera. And I just feel very strongly that those are some of the indications that prospective students and staff members and faculty members look to see how fluent you are in the spaces that mean the most to them.
I love that perspective and that representation piece. I remember I reached out to the person who's in charge of the LGBTQ center on campus just to have a conversation, and I think he was a little wary, about, like, "Why is this vice president reaching out to me?" And when I told him I identified as a queer woman, just, like, his face just lit up. It was like, "We have somebody on cabinet who, like, gets this." And it was so important to me, like, the way people just went overboard with thanking me for going to the lavender graduation, and it's like that little tiny thing of having somebody who's sitting on cabinet, who has an understanding of what it means to be part of this community, just really meant a lot to them, it seemed like. But I think about when I came out at Miami, the president, like, was so excited. He gave me every rainbow thing that ever existed. He had me riding on the Zamboni and waving at the hockey game that was for, like, Pride Week or something like that. Like, it was bonkers. But really, like, we can't just celebrate our LGBTQ plus community during Pride Month, right? And what can we do through the rest of the year to really authentically market and support our community?
I love this question, and my first response has always been I am as gay in February as I am in June, and I'm as black in June as I am in February. And I say that because we have been trained to only celebrate along the nationality months, the cultural appreciation months. And I think that that's fine. If that's, it makes it easy to navigate when you know that this month is for this and this month is for this. But if we're truly looking at how do we make a place feel inclusive and make you feel like you belong, we should be celebrating people of all different cultures and backgrounds all of the time. If we relegate it to just June, then people only connect our success with June. We're successful all year long.
Mhm.
And so while cultural heritage months are important, and I understand why institutions rely on them so much, I would challenge institutions to broaden the perspective and just highlight people all of the time. I think that the rules of engagement when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion are changing so rapidly, and the expectations from incoming classes, incoming staff members, incoming faculty members are higher. The bar is higher. There is more that brands, no matter what industry you're in, there's more that brands have to do to prove that you understand who I am as an individual inside of a larger community. And separating the year out into 12 buckets of celebration for different kinds of people really just keeps all of the celebrations separated. It doesn't bring any of it together. It doesn't sell it. It makes it hard to celebrate intersectionality, like you mentioned earlier. It relegates people to being one thing, and that is not. No one is one thing. No one. I don't care who you are.
Right,
You are
right.
not one single thing. And so I think that's like the first part of making sure that we are highlighting and amplifying stories across campus all year long, because otherwise it becomes very short sighted. And okay, it's gay month. What are we going to do when it should be year round, all the time planning to highlight the people who are making a difference in your community?
And I feel like times are changing, right? Like, when I started in higher ed 19 years ago, and when I started working at an institution, I'm not gonna give the specific number of years ago, because then people will go my LinkedIn and figure out who I'm talking about, but we profiled a trans student, and I got a lot of crap for it, to be perfectly honest, and I feel like today I wouldn't, and I don't think I would at that same institution if I were still there. Do you feel that things are shifting and changing over your lifetime since you were 16? Is it getting better?
Yeah, I do. I think right around the beginning of the pandemic. Do you remember the pandemic? I'm just kidding. It was around the beginning of the pandemic, I was asked to write a think piece around like about marketing and how it's changing and becoming more inclusive and diverse. And the main idea in that was that as marketers, as storytellers, we have to be brave first of all, but we have the power
Mhm.
to make a single decision that can impact the way people are seen in the way that we are seen as a brand or as an institution or even as a marketer. And some of the examples that I pulled for that piece, I'm not sure if you remember, there was a Cheerios commercial with a mixed race young woman, child of a black father and a white mother. And the news that came out of that and the people who were up in arms around about this young girl and the vitriol that was surfacing on social media, etc. That was a person's brave decision, a marketer's brave decision to say, we should represent other kinds of families. There was a
Yeah,
Subaru
yeah,
commercial that came out years ago that was about camping, and there was a black couple who had gone camping. I had never seen before that and since a commercial that had two black people camping. That was just not the way I was not grown. Was not raised that way. It was not like a picture I had in my head. And when I saw that Subaru commercial with this black couple, I was like, oh my god, someone decided to flip the script, and that's not something you often see. And then the last example I pulled was a Sealy mattress example, and it featured a gay couple. And these were all things that were like that have stuck into my head because again, there was a meeting, someone called a meeting, they have a campaign to, design, and someone said we should do something different. And that for that reason, that whoever that was, it has stuck with me and it showed what is possible in marketing. And so if we as marketers are brave and bold, then we can make decisions that are informed. They're not provocative because it's real life and people can see themselves in it. And I think that that's what some of what's missing in higher ed marketing is. Yes, you might be a triple major with a 4.65 GPA, playing every instrument in the band and debate and chess and all these things, but who are you loving and how are you learning? Are you neurodivergent? Are you bipolar? These are all parts of who we are as people. And if we're talking about stories of success, it is not just how often I'm opening a book. It's also what I'm bringing to the classroom, what I'm contributing to the community and the culture that I have invited myself into because I think that I align with what you stand for. And I think that those are some of the ways that we can start to be more compelling in the storytelling that we're doing in our job.
Hey guys, it's Zach here, founder of Enrollify, with some huge news. So I am ecstatic to announce that Element 451, the AI-powered all-in-one CRM platform for higher education, has acquired Enrollify. Back in 2019, I approached Tony Frega, the CEO of DD Agency, with an idea. Tony's a good friend of mine, and so I said, dude, let's build a next-generation media hub for higher ed marketers and admissions professionals. As a lover of media, I was just so impressed by how the attention landscape was changing and how brands like The Skim and The Hustle and Morning Brew began to eat up market share from more traditional publications. And I thought there was an opportunity to build something similar, obviously a lot smaller, but similar in the niche but oh so important arena of higher education marketing. Tony and the leadership at DD were gracious enough to allow me the time and the space to ideate on this half-baked idea and then launch Enrollify's first ever content asset, which was, you guessed it, the Enrollify podcast. Since then, Enrollify has grown into one of the most trusted resources for candid higher education marketing content in the industry, and we've welcomed industry giants like Terry Flannery, Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Eddie Francis, Dave Kibbles, and Jeremy Tiers, just to name a few, into our network of creators. As we started thinking about the next chapter of Enrollify's life, it became clear that it was time for Enrollify to scale. I'm pretty good at building things, but scaling things is a skill I'm still working on. When thinking about who could take Enrollify to the next level, I felt as if Artis, Mallory, and the leadership at Element 451 were uniquely qualified to inherit the brand. Element has actually been a part of Enrollify's story since the very beginning. They were our second podcast sponsor ever. They've invested in almost every experiment that we've ever run. They ship product faster than any other ed tech company I've ever met. And perhaps most importantly, Artis and the leadership team invest seriously in thought leadership and education. Building Enrollify has been the most rewarding experience of my professional career to date, and I couldn't be happier to collaborate with the Element team as we seek to take Enrollify to the next level. And don't worry, I'm not going anywhere just yet. You are not through with my lovely voice just yet. But if you've found any value in Enrollify over your years of tuning into our content or watching our videos, it would mean a lot if you could share a kind word or two about how Enrollify has helped inspire you or helped teach you something new about marketing on social media. It would really, really, really mean a lot to the whole Enrollify and Element team, but to me personally as well. So if you've gotten any value of any of the content that we've ever produced, share a quick story or a quick thought about us on social. That would be wonderful. Well, thanks so much for being here, guys, and get ready. We've got so much in store that I can't wait to share with you all soon. But for now, back to the podcast.
So I think even on maybe a much more trivial level, but maybe not. You hear these stories of, 95% of our alums have corner offices at financial firms. Well, what if I don't want to be in a corner office at a financial firm? What if I want to be a park ranger or an art teacher or anything else that signifies success to me? There are different versions of success. And so telling all of those stories, I think, is going to be really important for furthering the message of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we have been trained to think that there is one version of a person or of a student, as traditionally age. That's no longer the case, right? And one version of success. And I think that that's not fair.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that we're trying to tell the authentic stories of a whole person instead of just the slice of their life that is academics or studies or career or whatever outcome. It's the whole package about a person.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, um, uh, people's lives who look like mine and yours, they've become so politicized that it can be very easy to avoid those parts of a person because of you got a bunch of letters when you featured or a bunch of feedback when you featured a trans person. That might have to be one of the risks that you take in order to demonstrate that all are welcome here. And we'll see who wants to do that and who doesn't.
Yeah. I was like, over my dead body will we take this down? Like I was gonna like check right out. If we were gonna take down the trans student from the homepage, I was done.
Yeah,
But that takes a lot of courage, right? And sometimes you probably do risk all your political capital to do things like that.
right.
But then I see things and I think of things like WVU folk did a story about a student who was a student athlete, I think a baseball player, who came out to his team and his team was like, "We love you." And then 100% of their letters to the editor in their alumni magazine were, "Good for him. That's fantastic. I'm so happy for him. I'm so proud of his teammates. This is so great." I cried when I when I read all of those. And I think that that's like you sometimes just have to do things that are quote unquote risky to make the world better.
Right. And I mean the idea that things like that are risky at all, to feature a
Yeah.
story that is like that, I think is baffling among many other things. But we are at a time when people's lives are political, and
Yeah.
it will be up to institutions to determine where they would like to stand in those times of trial. We know that some institutions will not do what I might think is right or what you might think is right. I think it's important to note here that also that as passionately as I feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that means that people who have ideas and opinions that are opposite of mine also deserve the right to have space, et cetera. And so, while I will never shop at Chick-fil-A or Michael's, or not, I'm sorry, not Hobby Lobby, et cetera, there are people who really believe in those things. And that is an audience that they have built on their own, and that is fine. For me, I would much rather be associated with organizations that work to include as many people as possible than the alternative. I just wanted to say that out loud here as well.
You gave me a touch of fear when you said Michael's instead of Hobby Lobby because I was like, all my paycheck goes to Michael's. Am I supposed to not be spending money at Michael's? Have you seen any like cringeworthy efforts? Not naming any names, I don't want to out anybody, but any cringeworthy efforts on behalf of a university to reach this community?
Oh, efforts to reach the community. I think that the stereotypical approach to anything like this, right? Like, let's show that we have a healthy indigenous population here. And then it's all like formal wear, right? Like, it's not everything is wrapped up in the stereotypes of a culture. And I think that sometimes it can be thought of. And I think the intentions are, I think that they're well intentioned efforts. It's just, again, not fluent. Um, I think that it will be interesting to see how these efforts evolve, especially in states that have made policies around the use of diversity, the word, offices, all of it, and how institutions who might not agree with the policy try to attract and retain those students. But I haven't seen cringeworthy attempts to reach this audience, but I have seen just cringe-worthy things that have to do with this audience, like dead naming on diplomas,
Mm,
or
mhm.
of course, state policies, or it is hearing things like, you can be gay here, but we're not going to celebrate you in the least, right? Like, those are the kinds of things that
Mm,
they're obviously not efforts to attract members of our community. They're actually quite opposite. And that is even more cringeworthy, right? There is the wrong. You have the wrong way to do something, which is somewhat quite cringeworthy. I mean, you should take your licks if that's what you're doing. But active exclusion is of the utmost cringe for me. Those are the places where I feel the most concern for students. I mean, you've seen the articles about young GLBTQIA plus prospects changing their plans for college based on state policies. That's
right.
unfortunate. And that is a consequence that that state will have to deal with in terms of tax revenue, in terms of workforce, in terms of all of these other social things that that state needs. And they're making decisions that are regressive.
I wonder, how can a marketer who is not queer, a member of the LGBTQ community or whatever, and who maybe doesn't have any staff members who identify that way, how would you recommend they outreach to be able to get like, "Hey, am I creating something that's authentic, that is genuine, that is really inclusive and welcoming?" Do you recommend they reach out to their LGBTQ centers, their gender study centers? How do you suggest they tackle that?
I mean, I think there are lots of different ways to do that. I think it depends on what type of environment you are building this thing in. I think I am a fan of, generally, having the person who is curious about the quality of their work in this space taking a first swipe at it. I think what I would hope to avoid is like a another version of what we saw in 2020, where it was like a bunch of Black people being asked to do the work of teaching people about how things operate and whatever else. So I think that leaders who have this task in front of them should do the reading. I think they should have an understanding of what is going on in popular culture, in the political landscape, what is going on in their state. Because if you don't have an eye on those things, especially the part about the policies in the state, then you could be sending out a message that is patently false, right? Like, we welcome everyone except we are in South Dakota, or we welcome everyone except we are in Texas. And so I think that's the first thing, is get educated. And I think once whatever is being worked on has a first kind of attempt at it, bringing people in to talk through it with them, not like send it and say, look at this, tell me what you think. It's about having a really good and deep conversation about, do you maybe not do you feel reflected, but how do you think this aligns with what you know about your community, or how do you think this would land with student group X, if that's a person who's representing that group. I think that there are opportunities to have dialogue that are often missed for the sake of getting something done quickly, or there is fear around facing a person and having the conversation. We have to get past all that, because we want to do it right and we want to do it well. And it requires, if we don't have the information, to get the information in a human focused, respectful way.
And I think there's an imperative. If you're listening to this and you're not thinking about how your marketing supports, affirms, creates a sense of belonging for LGBTQ students, you're missing the boat. A Gallup poll said that almost 20% of Gen Z identifies as not heterosexual. That's a lot. That's 1 in 5 of your students. And we're seeing them have expectations and demands that they should have because they should feel welcomed and like they belong. But if you're listening and you're like, this isn't relevant to me, or we're talking about just such a small pool of people, you're not. We're not. We're talking about a lot of us.
And I think that's a really important point. And not only are there more people who identify as part of the community, but they are also more vocal, and they are also
Mhm.
very engaged in social media. They are very connected, and the whatever marketing that you're putting out and that is disconnected from the realities of your campus, people will find out and people will talk about it. And
Yeah.
the deficiencies that you might have in this space will be amplified and exploited and well publicized, as we have seen so often, in things that related to GLBTQIA plus community and other communities. It does not take long for bad news to spread in higher ed. And so those stories will be told whether you like it or not. And so
Yeah.
getting ahead of it, being strategic and thoughtful, intentional and respectful about it, is going to be the best bet, and doing it for the good of the institution, not just to fill seats, because you can make the promise, but you have to fulfill the promise as well.
Absolutely. If you say you're going to belong here and you don't belong here, that's going to be more damaging than if you never said that people would belong in the first place.
Exactly. And this idea that, so often we hear in higher ed about, we need college ready students. What I so rarely hear is student ready colleges, student ready institutions,
Yes.
right? And like, how do we switch the perspective about how we are talking about what we offer to people who want it, who might have different lived experiences, backgrounds, whatever it is, and can be their true authentic selves while becoming a bobcat or a wildcat or whatever it is the mascot is. It is not going to college is not you abandoning who you are as an individual. It is going to a place where you can contribute to the success of a community because of who you are, I think.
That gets me really energized. Another thing about Gen Z is that same poll said that about 2.5% of Gen Z identifies as either trans or non binary. And in the highly politicized world that we live in right now, being trans has been or has become very risky to be openly trans. How can higher ed help support our students who identify as trans or non-binary?
I don't have the answers to all of this at all, but I have ideas. One of the things I have been thinking about and I'm curious about is how we start to weave information and language about the trans community into marketing materials. Because what we're doing is like, we have 6 men's dorms and 6 women's dorms, and it's all binary
Yeah.
speak, and we don't live in a binary world, and we haven't ever, but right now it just feels even more so. And so I think having a language that is commonly understood and adopted is going to be helpful. I think if we start to see formal legal documents reflecting the progress that we're making in the world, how do you prefer, what are your pronouns on the applications, on, at the bursar's office, whatever, wherever there is formal documentation, having some sort of reflection of what you are trying to attempt on your campus is going to be really important. I think, again, diversity in faculty staff is going to be really important. Policies that accommodate transitioning, I don't know, like student health offices and all these other
Hmm.
places uh, that uh, decisions like this are made. If we can start having those, on campuses, that's an indication, right? I'm not sure how likely that is, especially in states that are not dealing with this right now. But I think the first step is getting real comfortable with language, getting real comfortable with the idea of what people are going through when they are transitioning. Um, and it is not all bad things, right? These are people who are finding themselves and stepping into a version of themselves that makes them live with such a level of joy that they have never experienced before, possibly. And it feels, what is happening around the trans community right now is so abhorrent, first of all. Um, and it feels like a cup game, like a shell game, right? In 2004, it was all eyes were on the gay community, and it was gay marriage, right? And that is what helped, the president get elected that cycle. Um, and now it's trans folks, and there will always be someone at the bottom of the barrel. Unfortunately, right now it's trans people, and as institutions of higher learning and as centers of progressive thought, and I don't mean progressive as in a political progressive, but just like moving the world forward, kind of society forward kind of thing, there should be space for these kinds of conversations on college campuses. I was just having a conversation on my podcast not too long ago about how critical the role campuses play in revolutions. Right, we've seen so many revolutions
Mm.
be participated in from college campuses, and as the demographics start to change and people start to become in places of power, we'll start to see some of the policies, I think, change in favor of progress, political progress. But until then, higher ed, I think, has a duty to provide a space for safe learning, regardless of who you are, or how you present, or who you love, or what color your skin is, or how you learn, or if you can see, or if you
Hmm.
can walk. Like this is education. And if we are so tied up in how a funder is going to might get mad about admitting a trans person, then what is our mission? What are we
Hmm.
doing?
Hmm.
Because I think that's an important conversation to be had. I feel very strongly about that.
It makes me think about in some of these states where there are laws that are kind of prohibiting students to transition during their pre-18 years, childhood years. Probably higher ed institutions need to be more prepared for students who are transitioning as they're going through their college experience, and we need to be prepared to support them emotionally, mentally, physically as they go through that, because it's something that they're just now figuring out their authentic selves because they've been restricted, which has probably been the case for a long time, but um, it's more and more important now, I think, as more and more people are feeling free to be their authentic selves.
And all the other things that we find out about ourselves in our college years, ignoring or abandoning this part of it is feels absurd to me, right? Like,
Yeah,
if we are going to ask essentially 18-year-olds to figure out to say, like, I'm going to be this for the rest of my life, but I'm picking a major,
yeah,
then they are
yeah.
also equipped to make decisions about themselves, right? Like, this is not like an extra or an add-on. I am who I am at any phase of my educational journey, and I would hope that the institution that I have picked to do this learning accepts me, no matter how, like, no matter what part or point of my journey I am on. Um, and I think it's really important to have those supports in place, especially for a rapidly changing demographic like the one we've been just talking about in Gen Z and Gen Alpha.
I have so much hope for our world because of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I think I can say as a Gen Xer that I feel like Gen Xers are raising excellent children.
Listen, if I had kids, we would be excellent parents. And I agree with you. Gen X is, I was watching a TikTok the other day about how Gen X is the forgotten generation. Don't mess with us because we have lived some life. And going from pre-internet to post-internet, that alone makes us a rough and tumble bunch of people. But I think you're right. I think we have benefited from seeing the world change so much that nothing can really rattle us when it comes to change like this. And so, yeah, I agree with you.
When I first started working in higher ed, the language around this was primarily LGBT, maybe not even the T, maybe just LGBT. So we know language is evolving and shifting and all of that. Do you have any recommendations for marketers to kind of stay up to date on what the evolving terminology is for all of these different type of intersections of a person?
One of the places I go for updated lists is GLAAD, GLAAD, and they have a really great glossary there. And in that glossary, the LGBTQIA plus glossary, they do also have links to glossaries that are specific to trans folks, and how to refer, how to ask, some definitions of some really important terms and phrases that are specific to that community. What I am pleased to see, relatively recently at least, is a surge of institutions who are developing diversity glossaries that cover not just the GLBTQIA plus communities, but also any community that has a vernacular of its own. The difference between Black and African American, the difference, like how to refer to different communities. And I think that it is a development that I did not expect from an industry like higher education, but I'm so pleased that it's starting to happen. You and I had a conversation about this on my podcast last year about how you developed one of those glossaries, and several other schools that I've worked with at Simpson Scarborough have done those as well. And we are starting to introduce that idea as we start to make these brand guidelines for other clients. Would you like to think about adding diversity language in your brand guidelines because you are talking to lots of different people? I think that those are things that become really, really helpful at the end of the day, and is also another indication if a prospective student or staff member or faculty member happens upon it, they will see what you are attempting to become or be, while making people more fluent in the language of culture.
I love that. And I am bookmarking GLAAD because I visited the site while you were talking and I was like, there is a ton of great stuff here. And it's not like I'm like totally new to the concept of GLAAD, but it never occurred to me that that would be a great place for finding resources around this.
It's a really great organization. There are lots of places though that, I mean, if you just type in GLBTQIA plus vernacular or language, a lot of resources will come up. And I don't really know who's like more accurate or up to date than others, but it's always nice to know that people are looking at it, first of all.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also important to note that, um, if you're a person who is a marketer who is unfamiliar with these spaces, be okay with making the mistakes. There will be mistakes made.
Mm.
It happens to everyone around. I told you, what my pronouns are, you messed it up, and that will happen. And just know that you are attempting to do the right thing at all times, and the intention is what is well placed. But mistakes will be made, and that is okay. The attempt is more important than the perfection and the learning development process for understanding communities. I think, as long as an effort is being made, then I'm cool. And if there's no progress though in the effort, then we have to have a conversation.
Right, right. When you have to be open to the feedback, right? Like when you do something that isn't quite right, you have to be willing to hear when somebody tells you you missed the mark.
Totally. And as
Yeah.
marketers, we have to, I mean, no matter what we're doing, we have to be okay with
Mhm.
that. And I think that that's a really great point to raise.
Any other resources that you recommend for marketers who are interested in exploring this topic further?
It's important to be very, very well informed as a marketer about what's going on at your state house, when it comes to marginalized communities. I think that has a direct tie into your messaging and your efforts and where you're pulling students from. I think reading as much as possible is important beyond, the GLBTQIA community. I think understanding the history of African Americans in higher ed with The State Must Provide, or these
Mhm.
other books that talk about the histories of communities and how they have either given the opportunity to learn or not. I think, familiarizing yourself with the histories of who you're trying to attract is going to be really important. You can't, I find it hard to market or develop messages for a group of people if I don't understand the context in which it's landing, right? Like, you know, there are schools that have statues of anti-civil rights folks that might be on the front of a book, and you're going to send that thing to, a
Right.
black community. That might not be. You need to understand why that is not why that's problematic. So just being like fluent in those spaces, I think, is going to be really important, and that information can come from all types of different places. Um, but I think talking to students is going to be one of the best ways to get the information that you need around why did you choose this institution? What is it about this brand or this experience or whatever it was that got you here? What was it that got you here? Do you feel supported here? And if so, why? And with what? And if not, how come? What is missing? I think those are all things that we have to be comfortable learning, because there will always be another group of people who we can improve the experience for. The senior who got here four
Mm.
years ago might not have had all the support services that they needed. But if the freshman who came in this year is like, man, I feel so great, I can be open, openly gay here, whatever, that senior sees a legacy that is being laid for the classes that come up behind him or her. And I think that it's really important to have that view, that alumni often have, like, if I applied here now, I would never get in. Well, if I applied here now, I would be able to be who I was then, openly. And I think that is just as important as, the return on your investment for your diploma and the value of your degree, et cetera. If you see that your institution, your alma mater, uh, is flourishing with people living authentically, I mean, I think that's a very valuable story to tell.
I absolutely love how you said that. That's so motivational. I mean, it's such an inspiring thing to think of about how what we do as marketers can help create a sense of belonging that can make somebody feel like they can be their authentic self, which lets them be who they were meant to be. You're not going to achieve who you were meant to be if you can't be your authentic self.
Exactly. And what kind of success can you expect to have for yourself if you're so worried about how you're presenting, or so worried about your safety, or so worried about what you'll be called in the street? Learning can't happen when stress is taking over everything. And so if we just create communities and environments where learning is first and who we are is contributing and not detracting, I think that's great. I think one of the things that I still find so troubling in higher ed vernacular is like, oh yeah, diversity would be great for our students. And it feels so like white centered, where it's like, yeah, I think it would be great for our students to learn about, diverse people, diverse backgrounds. Well, there's, first
Right.
of all, there's diversity that exists on your campus already, whether you see it or not. But
Right.
also, we should maybe reframe that to say a bit, to make it a bit more inclusive. I think there are all these ways that higher ed talks to and about itself that inherently, I think it's just by practice, feel exclusive. And once we get out of that, then we can make some really bold, brave decisions about how we talk about what we do every single day to move the world forward.
Where can people find you if they want to chat with you?
They can find me anywhere that sells wine. I'm just kidding.
You and me both.
They can find me on Twitter at Kevin C. Tyler 2. And then they can find me on Instagram. This is a way different thing, but it's called The Full Belly Blogger. I write about food and wine on the side. And so that's what,
Oh, nice.
then on LinkedIn, it's Kevin Tyler.
I am so curious about Kevin C. Tyler too. Who claimed Kevin C. Tyler 1?
Well, I don't know who claimed it. It was an email address I had back in the day, and I just kind of transferred it over to Twitter. And Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation. I'm so glad that this conversation it keeps happening in higher ed. I think it's a very important one to keep having. I think oftentimes we think of diversity, equity, inclusion as a destination, and it's an ever evolving kind of thing. And so, thank you for creating space for this chat, and thank you for carrying the flag for the community the way that you are in higher ed and also in your personal life. I think it's really, really important and very cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Kevin did not mention he has a podcast.
I did.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, where people can find yours?
Sure. I have a podcast called Higher Voltage. It's a podcast about higher education marketing, and we cover topics from A to Z. The most recent, or the next episode to drop, will be with Britt Kerwin, talking about First Amendment speech on college campuses in the shadow of the Israel war in Israel. And so it's diversity, it's rankings, it's every topic under the sun that relates to marketing. Super fun.
And it is one of the only podcasts I listen to every single episode of. It is fantastic. It's fantastic. So listeners, you can always find me on, I hate to say it, X,
Twitter.
Jaime Hunt IMC, JAI, right? JAIMEHUNTIMC. LinkedIn is a better place to find me, Jaime Hunt. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Kevin. It's just such a pleasure. And I can't believe I waited 40 episodes, but I was just waiting for the right topic.
Listen,
right?
I get it. I appreciate the opportunity, and we'll have to have you back on Higher Voltage to talk about some of this as well.
All right, listeners, as always, let's go bust some silos.
Bust them.
Hey y'all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jaime Hunt. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing, learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.